This video will show the closed season work undertaken at Stainsby Mill on the Hardwick Hall estate during November 2012 to January 2013. At the end of each season, the French burr runner stone, shown on the right, is raised so they can be cleaned. They have been milling all season. The Derbyshire gritstone, shown on the left, was raised this time to inspect its surface and its bearing, which was found to be in need of a clean. The gritstone's surfaces were in good order, probably because they had not been used for many years. They are solid stones quarried near Hathersage and were only used for animal feed in the 1850s. The cleaning of the French burr stones is time-consuming and tedious, as there is no quick way of scraping the old flour out of the grooves and stitching. The cleaning has to be done, as any flour left on the surfaces would, in the damp conditions of the mill, become stale and set hard. This would reduce the efficiency of the milling in the following season. A vacuum cleaner is used to catch the flour particles as they are loosened. After hours of cleaning, you can see the difference in the appearance of the surface, now completely clear of all flour particles. These stones are made from quartz blocks, quarried in France. Quartz is extremely hard. These are the original stones, made in 1849. Whilst the cleaning was being done, the Derbyshire gritstone bearing was also cleaned. The vertical drive shaft that turns the runner stone is held in a collar. The collar is held in place by bolts that clamp it to the floor, hence stopping any lateral movement of the shaft. Most water mills use gears to transmit the motion from the water wheel to the stones and other machinery. To change the direction of motion from the horizontal to the vertical, a crown gear and bevel or pinion gear is used, as shown in this diagram. This not only changes the direction of motion, but also speeds up the motion by approximately 5 times. The vertical axle then turns the top runner stone. The small bevel gear for the Derbyshire gritstone needed some repair work. It had broken quite a few years ago and had been patched. You can see the bracing piece on the top. This bracing now showed signs of failing, and it was decided to take the whole bevel gear away for a complete repair. The only way to get the gear off the vertical axle is to first raise the axle, then unbolt the gear from the axle and slide it down and off the end. Looking at the bearing at the top of the gritstone axle in more detail shows it has a rounded top, which fits into a corresponding hollow in a casting on the runner stone. Before raising the vertical axle, the bolts on the collar must be loosened first. This will then allow the axle to move slightly sideways so that the bevel gear can miss the crown gear meshing and slide off the bottom of the axle. Here is the nuts below the collar being loosened.
Quite simple to make when you think about it. Doing it on two flats, and then you just
No, just
it's a bit involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of it. Nothing to know, would it?
It's all moving now. Got a 5 round you on that.
Because if you look at it, it's tapered. Oh, I know.
Yeah.
So, you know what to ask for? Oh, you get a lot of biscuit.
To raise the drive axle, a crowbar under the bearing was used, together with blocks of wood wedged under to keep the axle raised.
Right. Let's go down and have a look, see how far it is. It's not got to go up.
It's got picked it up about 4 inches more, hasn't it? There, look.
It's not got to go up on a great deal to get that down, has it?
The gap produced at the bottom of the axle can be seen.
I don't think it'll still catch just as we drop down.
Yeah. We can't twist it, can we?
And now compare it to the original axle and gear position. Once the axle was raised sufficiently, the clamping screw on the bevel gear was removed. The bevel gear was now loose, but could not be slid down off the axle because there was a collar, which was tight on the axle below the bevel gear.
I don't think that's connected to let the weight on it. Yeah, not yet. When we come and bring it back tonight,
Pardon?
which is getting it done today.
I don't know who's doing at it. I don't know who's got to do with it.
The plan is for you to get back to yard,
Yeah.
either repair it or, because it's got a big crack in it, you can see. Just
Yeah, it's been repaired, hasn't it?
repair it and then probably pop back next week.
Right.
There's no,
It's a keyway up there, isn't this one, mate?
That should
Yeah.
be.
This collar proved extremely difficult to loosen, but eventually it was successfully removed and the bevel gear was taken away for repair. The wooden ton which fits round the gritstones was to be upgraded by having a metal insert added. The French burr stone ton already has this, as can be seen. To get the ton out of the mill, it had to be partially dismantled. After about a week, the work on the bevel gear and ton had been completed. Tons surround milling stones and hence are large, being approximately 3 inches in diameter greater than the stones. So the ton, in its partially dismantled state, was brought into the mill using the outside staircase, as there was not enough room downstairs inside the mill to manoeuvre such a large object. The new metal insert can be seen inside the ton. In the 1850s, tons did not have this metal insert, but they are now recommended in the interests of hygiene. The ton was then reassembled, attaching a metal band with screws. then placing the rest of the woodwork on which the hopper and the shoe mechanism will be attached later.
Going for a laugh or something, you're proud.
Yeah. What you
Oh, yeah.
free next week? You been away?
Well, like this week. Well, we
Yeah.
don't come back. We'll wait till just before New Year to come back. Like for
Next, the repaired bevel gear was slid onto the vertical axle. This gear, made out of cast iron with wooden teeth, is very heavy and so has to be secured with straps that are attached to bolts just under the vertical axle's top collar. Hooks on the ends of these straps hold the gear.
if we bit more.
Is that all it does? Just lugs it?
Let down on that.
Cement it. No, just up a bit.
It's sat down.
That's it.
The axle is cleaned and lubricated, and the collar is slid up, with the aid of some brute force, to its position on the axle.
Yeah,
Key well
sorry,
above,
yeah,
well above paint
yeah,
on.
yeah.
It is then bolted onto the axle.
I think as it comes down, if we can.
The bevel gear is then lowered down onto the collar.
That's the easy bit done. But hard bit won't last long.
The vertical axle is now lowered slowly down, making sure its bottom bearing is kept aligned with its socket.
Like Lego.
The bevel gear position is now checked, making sure it is meshing into the crown gear correctly.
Yes, that's down at that. That's a good bottom, isn't it?
Yeah.
The nuts on the bolts of the vertical axle's top collar are now tightened. Once this is done, the axle is in its correct position and will no longer be able to move sideways.
What are you going to do? Have it running and see if it...
I don't know, I'm just going to let that pull up, so you can always lower it. If it's drying, you can't.
Just slap this one off the top there.
Here is the bevel gear assembly completed, also showing the lower arm holding it out of mesh.